Chapter 2. The Princess.
The king remained silent on his journey home. The promise he made to the wolf was a foolish one, yet he could not say no to him. The king wondered who would be first to greet him. Perhaps a servant, or maybe even his loyal pet Red 13. He dreaded the idea of telling someone that he or she must leave his or her home to live in a palace of a wolf. Although he was kind, he was an animal, and could very well tear someone limb from limb. King Gast felt much power in the animal, and coldness in his eyes, that would make any man cower before it. As the procession neared the home, the king watched for any sign of someone or something coming to him. He feared any peasant in his kingdom, or perhaps a guard, would run to greet him. He wanted to order his procession to go and warn the people, but the promise he made to the wolf rang in his ears. The nearer they came, he noticed a small red creature running toward him. The king was overjoyed as his loyal pet Red 13 came running towards him. Surely Red 13 would go without a qualm. Relief washed over him for a moment, thinking he was safe from telling a person of his current predicament. Yet horror struck the king when he saw his daughter waving to him as she too ran with the pet. He wanted to scream at his daughter to stop. However, no words escaped his mouth. He was sure Red 13 would outrun the young girl. After a moment, he noticed his daughter running faster than the pet. It then occurred to him that his faithful pet was old, and could no longer run for such long distances anymore. His beautiful daughter was a good distance ahead of his pet, as she waved vigorously at her father, happy he was unharmed.
Father! I am so happy you are safe. I thought you would have missed my birthday.
The king looked pale as his daughter looked up at him with her bright emerald eyes, a smile on her lips. The king trembled. She touched his hand, which she felt shake in her grasp.
Father?
The king returned to the palace, his face remaining pale. When his wife came to his side, she noticed the horror on his face. Queen Ifalna ordered the servants to prepare food and draw a bath for her husband. The servants scrambled to fill their queen's orders. The king shook his head and quietly took his wife, daughter, and the trusted guard to a private room. He explained the dreadful situation to his wife and daughter. The queen clutched her only daughter to her protectively. Sung, the king's guard, looked sadly at the family. He looked at the daughter, who was to be 16 in 2 days. The king regretted for letting the wolf hypnotize him with those eyes to say yes. He sat sadly in a chair, depressed in the thought of losing his only daughter.
But the wolf does not know who greeted you first. Tell him it was Red 13 who greeted you first, and your daughter shall be spared.
Yes, lie to him.
The princess remained silent, unsure of what to say in such a situation. Sung placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him, touching his hand. The king looked up at his companions and then reached for his daughter. He hugged her closely. The king agreed, refusing to let his daughter go. The days leading up to the arrival of the wolf were worrisome. The king dreaded the idea that the wolf might realize it was his own daughter who greeted him. He dreamed of the wolf coming to the castle and stealing his daughter away. The terrible nightmares left the king with little sleep and constant lookout for his daughter. His wife and little knight comforted him as best as they could, but he could neither remove the thought of losing his daughter. Yet the wolf's voice filled his mind.
For your sake, sire, do not go back on your word.
The queen tried hard to stifle her sobs when she thought of how her daughter could have been taken away. She was grateful of Sung's idea, yet as the days came and went, she felt confident that her child would be safe and spent her time in ignorant bliss. The princess spent many days quietly. She did not particularly like the idea of deceiving someone who saved her father. She spent her birthday trying her best to be grateful for all the gifts, but her mind was on the day that would come soon after. She feared more for her father's safety than anything else. After all, she wished only for her father's safe return when he left his country. The princess spent the last night before the wolf was to arrive in her room with her pet. She stroked her pet gently, but he could feel the worry radiating from her. He laid his head on her knee in an attempt to comfort. The princess merely hugged her pet, hoping it would offer her some comfort. It did not. Her mind was simply on the wolf. The 7th day came, and as he said, the wolf arrived. The king allowed him into the castle apprehensively. He looked every bit as regal as before, but also massive and threatening. His spiky black fur was glossy and looked sharp as before. His claws on all 4 of his paws were exposed as well, sharp and deadly. His piercing blue eyes looked between the 2 royals. The queen found herself holding in a sharp breath, only to calm herself when the king held her hand. The wolf stood before the king and queen. He bowed his head respectively to them, and they nodded in response. Next to the king was Sung, holding tightly to Red 13. Sung remained calm, not wanting to draw any unwanted attention. The king refused to have his daughter in the throne room when the wolf arrived. However, the curious princess spied from behind a corner. She watched the wolf mesmerized. She did not expect him to have such a glossy coat, and he could be much bigger than an actual wolf. The princess held her breath, wondering if it could talk like her father said. She waited, her heart thumping. The wolf spoke.
I have come for the one who has greeted you first on your arrival home.
As promised, my loyal pet Red 13 was the one. Take him and be content.
The king motioned Sung to take Red 13 to the wolf. The wolf eyed the pet, and then the king. His eyes narrowed, becoming cold. The wolf let out a low growl. He bared his teeth threateningly, causing Sung to stop dead in his tracks. He stared at the king and then let out a howl.
Do not lie to me!
The king and queen tensed. The queen's eyes flashing to her daughter. The wolf, now with his suspicions confirmed, snarled. The wolf lunged at the king, his paws pressing on the king's chest, pinning him to the throne. The queen flew from her seat in fright. Sung unsheathed his sword and moved towards the wolf prince. The wolf prince was quicker, and with a swipe of his paw, Sung lost the grip on his weapon and fell to the floor.
You lied to me after our agreement. I saved your life, and this is what I received to sit. I should have let you drown in a river. Shall I kill you now for your treachery?
The wolf snarled and bared its teeth at the king, ready to kill when the princess flew from her hiding space. She threw herself between her father and the wolf. Tears poured out of her eyes as she clung to her father for her safety. Queen Ophalma screamed for her daughter to run, but the princess stared at the wolf, unblinking.
No! Please! It was I who greeted my father. Take me if you wish. But do not harm my father.
The wolf stepped back, releasing the king, rubbing the pain out of his chest.
You were honorable.
The wolf spoke to the princess.
Yet, your father has lied to me.
If you spare him, I shall go without complaint.
The wolf moved toward her. It stretched its neck and moved its snout to her ear, as its breath tickled her ear.
Swear to me. Swear that you will stay in my castle as my companion. That you will do as I say and be content. I'll spare your father if you do.
He moved away. The wolf eyed the princess, ignoring the royal court's pleas for the princess to stay. King Gast clutched his daughter, but she simply slipped from him. She stood in front of the wolf, her head high. He stared at her, seeing nothing but pure, unselfish love for her father.
I swear I will go with you.
The wolf nodded and lowered himself to the ground.
Climb on my back, and I shall take you with me and leave your lying father alive.
The princess nodded bravely and stepped towards the wolf. The entire court protested again, but the princess did as the wolf instructed. Carefully she touched its spiky fur and found it incredibly soft, like silk or velvet. She climbed on its back, and in a flash, he ran from the palace in such a blinding speed. The princess clung to his fur in fright of falling.
Do not fear. We shall arrive at my palace shortly.